The camera uploaded 47 photos from inside cabin 6. I need to say that first, plainly, before I explain anything, because it's the fact everything else grew out of, and because I have spent a long time trying to make it mean something other than what it means, and I have not been able to. Cabin 6 was locked from the outside, sealed, with a paper tag glued across the door gap that had my own signature on it from 3 weeks earlier. The windows were boarded from the outside, plywood screwed into the frames, the screw heads gray with weather. No ranger had entered. No one had entered. And the camera that took those photos, camera 14, was strapped to a pine tree about 40 feet from the cabin, facing the trail, facing away from the building. It watched a path through the trees. From where it hung, it could no more see the inside of cabin 6 than a camera on a fence post could see the inside of your house. But every one of those 47 photos was taken from inside the cabin, looking out through the boarded windows at the dark trees, looking across a room at a door that was latched from the far side. And the last photo, number 47, showed a man standing outside that cabin door in the gray morning light, his hand lifted toward the handle. The man was me. The timestamp said 6:52 in the morning. At 6:52 that morning, I was sitting 11 miles away with a cup of bad coffee, and I had not gone anywhere near cabin 6, and I would not go there for another hour. I'm a park ranger. I've worked backcountry a long time, in a district I'm not going to name, in country I'm not going to put on a map, because I don't want anybody deciding to go look. Most of the job is turning frightening things into ordinary things. A light in the trees is a hunter's headlamp. A scream is a fox. A shape in the water is a log. You write the report, and the fear goes back in its box. So when I tell you that I could not turn cabin 6 into anything ordinary, I want you to understand I tried harder than I have ever tried at anything, because I am not a man who wants to believe what I'm about to tell you. I'll go in order. Everything documented, everything in sequence. It's the only way I know how to carry it. It was a cold morning in the middle of October, and I came into the South District office before 6, the way I usually did, because I liked the quiet before the phone started. I started the coffee, which was terrible, and had been terrible for years, and which nobody would fix because fixing it would mean admitting somebody was in charge of it. I poured a cup anyway and carried it into the camera room to check the overnight uploads. We ran a trail camera network across the district then, around 30-some cameras, each strapped to a tree or a post, watching the things we couldn't watch ourselves. Closed roads, spots where people like to camp illegally, wildlife corridors, elk and bear, and the old cabins, the winter patrol shelters we'd shut down and sealed years back, because kids like to break into them and drink and sometimes light fires, and we wanted to know if anyone was messing with them. The cameras were motion-triggered. Something moves, the camera fires, and if it had cell signal, it uploaded to the system, into a folder by camera number, with the timestamp and GPS coordinates and battery level stamped right on each frame. Most mornings you got 40 pictures of deer, and one of a branch swinging in the wind. It was boring work, and boring was good. Boring meant nobody was out there doing something they shouldn't. That morning, the camera 14 folder had 47 new photos in it, and I opened it expecting deer. The first photo was the inside of a room. I actually checked the camera number again, because my first thought was that I'd fat-fingered the wrong folder. Camera 14. Tree outside cabin 6, Old Service Road 12, facing the trail. I knew that camera. I'd hung it myself 2 years before. It watched an empty path, and once in a while an elk walked through. And that was the whole story of camera 14. But the photo on my screen was the inside of a wooden room, shot in that flat gray infrared the cameras use in the dark. Boarded windows seen from the inside, the raw back of the plywood, thin white lines of daylight coming through the seams. A plank floor. Through the gaps between the boards, the dark shapes of trees. It was a photograph taken inside a building, looking out. And the building was cabin 6. I knew that floor. I'd stood on it, years back, before we sealed the place up. I clicked to the next one. Same room, turned, as if whoever held the camera had pivoted. The cabin door across the room, the iron latch down in the locked position, the way it would look if you were standing inside a locked cabin staring at the door that held you in. Next, a table I didn't remember, old and heavy. On it, a kerosene lantern with a glass chimney, not a battery lantern, the old kind. Next, the table closer, beside the lantern, a book, open, a ledger, columns and lines, the kind of book you sign your name in. I went through all 47, slow. My coffee went cold. The office filled up around me with the ordinary sounds of people arriving. The door, the radio, somebody's phone, and I didn't hear a bit of it. The photos moved through the cabin like a person walking it. The windows, the door, the table, a cot in the corner, with a folded gray blanket, wet boot prints on the plank floor, dark and shining in the infrared, tracked from the door to the table, like someone had come in out of the rain, except the door hadn't opened in years. A coffee cup on the table with a thin thread of what might have been steam coming off it. A map pinned to the wall, an old survey map, and I could make out enough to see that the trail drawn on it in faded red was the Blackroot Spur, a route we'd closed and abandoned so long ago it wasn't on any current map, gone before I ever started. And in one photo, at the very edge of the frame, there was a hand. Just a hand and part of a forearm, coming in from the side, resting on the edge of the table by the ledger. The sleeve was dark, and at the cuff there was a band of lighter trim, the kind you'd see on an old uniform. An old Ranger uniform, the style from before my time, before Dale's time even. A hand in an old Ranger's sleeve, resting easy on the table, in a cabin locked and empty for years. I told myself it was a hoax. Somebody had broken in, staged the cabin, swapped the memory card. That was the reasonable answer, and I held on to it like a handrail, even though I already knew it didn't fit, because of photo 47. Me at the door, in daylight, my hand raised toward the handle. The tear on my left coat cuff was in the picture, the tear I'd been meaning to sow for a month. Time-stamped 11 minutes ahead of the clock on the wall. I want to be honest about what I did next, because it's the most ordinary thing in the world, and it's why none of this ever got easier. I didn't panic. I started checking metadata. That's what I am. When a procedural man sees something impossible, his first move is to prove the paperwork wrong, because if the paperwork is wrong, then the photos are wrong, And if the photos are wrong, then he can go back to a world that makes sense. The paperwork was not wrong. That was the problem. The paperwork was perfect. Camera 14, serial number matched. GPS on every one of the 47 frames put the camera on its tree outside cabin 6, within a few feet, the same coordinates it had reported for 2 years. Battery dropping steady across the night. No reset, no interruption. Upload logs showed the photos coming in over the cell network in a smooth stream from a little after 5 to 6:52 in the morning. No gap, no bulk dump that would say somebody loaded them at once. The camera never lost signal. According to every number in the system, camera 14 had spent the night on a tree outside cabin 6, facing the trail, doing what it always did. And it had taken 47 photos from inside a locked cabin. I went and got Mara Ellis. Mara ran dispatch and handled the camera system on the technical side, the uploads and storage and network, and she'd been doing it long enough that she knew that system better than the people who sold it to us. She was the one person I trusted to tell me I'd made a mistake. I wanted her to tell me I'd made a mistake. She came in with her own coffee, in the chipped mug that said World's Okayest Dispatcher, which somebody had given her as a joke, and which she used every single day, and she leaned over my shoulder and looked at the first photo, then the second. She set the mug down. She scrolled through the whole batch herself without saying anything, and I watched her face go from mild interest to the flat, careful stillness she got when a real call was coming in. When she reached 47, she stopped. She looked at the coat in the picture, at the tear on the cuff, and then she looked at the same tear on the cuff of the coat I had on. "Okay," she said. "Who set this up?" "That's what I'm asking you." "Because if somebody's messing with my system," she said, "I want to know how. Because I've got it locked down pretty tight, and I don't like the idea that they got in." She sat down at the second terminal, cracked her knuckles the way she always did before a job she took seriously, and went into the raw storage underneath the front-end app that just shows you the pretty pictures. She worked for the better part of an hour, and I mostly kept quiet and let her. She checked file creation times against the upload log. She checked the checksums, which are a kind of fingerprint every file carries, that change if anyone alters even a single pixel. She checked which accounts had logged in overnight, whether anyone had touched the folder, whether the files had been modified after they landed. She muttered to herself while she did it. Small things, that's fine, that's, that kind of thing. The was not good. When she finished, she sat back and rubbed her eyes with the heels of her hands, and she looked tired in a way that had come on in the last hour. "Nobody edited these," she said. "Checksums are clean. The files were written by the camera and uploaded by the camera at the times the log says. The only login overnight was the automated system pulling uploads. Nobody touched the folder before you opened it at 6:41. Nobody photoshopped anything." She paused. "And you can't swap the card remotely." "The card's physical. It's in the camera on the tree. If those photos are on the card, the camera took them. It can't have." "I know it can't have," she said, a little sharp, not at me, at the situation. "I'm telling you what the system says. The system says the camera was on the tree all night. The system says the camera took 47 photos of the inside of a building it's not inside of. Both of those at the same time." She picked her mug back up, looked into it, didn't drink. I don't like this. I want you to know that. I've been doing this 11 years and I don't like this at all. That was the first time. There would be a lot of times over the weeks that came when the system said something that couldn't be true, and every single time we checked, and every single time the numbers were flawless, and every single time the flawlessness was worse than an error would have been. An error you can fix. A perfect record of an impossible thing just sits there and looks back at you. I decided to go to cabin 6. It was the only thing to do. Either somebody had staged it, and I'd find a torn seal and pry marks, and I'd have a break-in to work, or the camera had been moved or tampered with, and I'd find it turned around or gone, or none of that. And I did not want to think about none of that. Whatever it was, the answer was at the cabin, and I'd rather find it in daylight. I told Mara my route and to expect me back by early afternoon. She said, "Radio me from the gate and from the cabin. Both. I mean it." She'd never said that to me before for a cabin check. I drove out to the locked gate at the bottom of Old Service Road 12, worked the padlock, drove up as far as the road stayed passable, and walked the last stretch. It was a cold, still day. The pines stood close on both sides, dark and dripping from the night's rain, and the dirt of the road was soft. I watched the ground the whole way, out of habit, reading it. There were no fresh boot prints on that trail but the ones I was making. Nobody had walked up here. If somebody had staged that cabin overnight, they hadn't come by the road, and there is no other way to cabin 6 that doesn't cost you half a day cross-country through closed country. The cabin sat in the small clearing where the road dead ends. A squat log building, shake roof gone green with moss, windows blind with weathered plywood, the door shut. I stopped at the edge of the clearing and I made myself look at that door, and I thought about photo 47, me standing about where I was standing now, hand raised, and the cold went all the way through me. I checked my watch, well after 7. The moment in the photo, 6:52, had already come and gone, and I hadn't been here for it. I'd been in the office, and here I was, walking to the exact spot anyway. I did the door first. The seal was intact. Paper tag glued across the gap between door and frame, my signature and the date, 3 weeks old, from the fall round of cabin checks. Whole. Not torn, not lifted at a corner, not re-glued. Under it the door was locked, iron latched down, needing a key. I checked the plywood on every window. Every screw was seated, the heads unmarked. No fresh scratches from a driver. The wood gray and swollen and clearly not moved in years. I walked all the way around the cabin, slow, checking the base of the walls the way you check a building for a way in, and there was no way in. No loose board. No broken pane behind the plywood. No gap under the eaves that a person could fit through. It was sealed exactly as I'd left it 3 weeks before, and in the soft dirt around the whole building, there were no footprints at all. Not one, except mine, being made right then. Nobody had walked around this cabin. Nobody had stood at that door. The hoax theory, the whole reasonable handrail I'd been gripping, died right there in the clearing. I radioed Mara, told her the seal was intact, the cabin was locked, no forced entry, no prints. There was a silence on her end, and then she said, "Copy," and then, Go look at the camera. Camera 14 was on its pine, 40 feet off, right where it belonged, at chest height, the strap tight, the housing weathered but sound. It pointed at the trail, away from the cabin, exactly as I'd mounted it. The lens was dry and clean, no fog, no smear, aimed at the empty path through the trees, the way it had aimed at that path for 2 years. From where it hung, you could barely see the cabin at all, just a corner of it if you crouched down to the lens and looked where it looked. It saw the trail. It could only ever have seen the trail. I opened the housing and took out the SD card and put it in the reader I carry and pulled it up on my phone, right there under the tree, because I needed to know whether the physical card matched the upload or whether something had happened between the tree and the office. They matched. Same 47 photos. The inside of the cabin, the boarded windows from within, the lantern, the ledger, the wet boot prints, the hand in the old sleeve. Photo 47, me at the door, 6:52. The card and the camera on the tree, the camera pointed at the trail, held 47 photographs of the inside of the sealed cabin behind it. I stood under that pine a long time with the card in my hand and the locked cabin at my back, and I could not make the two facts be true together, and they were both true, and I had checked each one with my own hands. I brought the card back and spent that evening at the big monitor blowing the photos up frame by frame, and the more I looked, the worse it got, because the details were specific, and specific is what makes a thing real. The lantern wasn't just an old lantern. Zoomed in, I could read a number stenciled faint on the base, a district equipment number, old style, from before we changed inventory systems. That lantern had belonged to this district. It had been logged out to a winter patrol decades back, off a list that didn't exist anymore. It should have been surplused or thrown out ages ago. And there it sat on the table. In the dark frames, the lantern was cold and dark. That detail stayed with me, and it would matter. The ledger was a cabin register, the old kind we kept in the winter shelters, where a ranger passing through would sign in, note the date and the weather, and anything worth noting, and sign out. We stopped keeping them when we closed the cabins, and the registers came back to the office and went into the archive. The Cabin 6 register should have been in a box in the archive room, but there it was on the table, open, with writing on the page. The cot had a gray wool blanket folded at the foot. The map on the wall was the dead blackroot spur. The coffee cup had steam coming off it, and I stared at that one the longest, because you don't fake steam, and steam means something hot, right then, in a cold locked cabin nobody had entered in years. And the hand in the old sleeve, resting by the register. I zoomed until the picture broke into blocks, and I could see the cuff and its lighter band of trim, and above it, at the very edge, the suggestion of a shoulder, dark, turned away. A person, sitting at that table, in a uniform nobody had worn in 40 years. The next morning, I went to check the keys, because if that door had ever been opened, it had been opened with a key, and there were only two, and I wanted to see both of them with my own eyes. The man who handled the cabin keys was named Cortez. He'd done maintenance for the district longer than I'd been there, and he was careful and grumpy in the specific way of men who've spent a career getting blamed for other people's mistakes. He kept a key log, every key, every checkout, every return, signed and dated, in a green ledger book he guarded like it was cash. He was proud of that book, and he had a right to be, because in 20-some years it had never once been wrong, and it drove him crazy that the rest of us didn't keep our records the way he kept his. I asked him about the keys to cabin 6, and he had the log open before I finished the sentence. 2 keys, he said. Only ever been 2. What happened? I told him I was chasing a camera problem. He gave me a look that said he didn't believe me and wasn't going to push it. He walked me to the office lockbox and opened it, and there was the first key, on its tagged ring, exactly where it should be. Then he got on the phone to headquarters and had somebody open the district safe while we waited, and that key was there too, tagged, in place. Neither key had been signed out in over a year. The last checkout of either one was mine, 3 weeks earlier, for the fall seal check, and I'd signed it back in the same afternoon. It was right there in his book, in his neat block printing. Nobody's touched these keys, Cortez said. That door's been locked since spring. Seal's yours. He closed the lockbox and stood there with his hand on it a second, and then he said, quieter, not grumpy anymore. I've had that cabin on my rounds a long time. I don't like it. Never have. You want my honest opinion. Whatever you're chasing, chase it from here. He tapped the desk. From inside the office. You understand me? I told him I did. I didn't tell him the truth. I felt bad about it, lying to a man who kept a better record than any of us, and who was, it turned out, trying to warn me. It wasn't the last time I'd feel bad about lying to somebody over cabin 6. So there it was, locked up tight. 2 keys, both accounted for, in a log that had never been wrong in 20 years. A seal with my own signature on it, unbroken. Windows boarded, screws unmarked. No forced entry, no footprints, no way in. By every physical measure and every official record, cabin 6 was impossible to enter, and it had photographed its own inside 47 times and photographed me at its door before I got there. Then the missing hiker case started, and cabin 6 stopped being a strange puzzle on my desk and became something I was standing inside of. His name was Vale. I want to tell you about him as a person before I tell you about the photo, because for a while he was just a name on a report, and then he was a real man, and the difference matters to how I've had to live with all this. He was 43, a day hiker, experienced, the kind who knows what he's doing and doesn't take dumb risks. His wife Denise called it in the morning after he didn't come home, and I took part of that first call myself. She was doing that thing people do when they're scared but trying to be reasonable, apologizing for bothering us, saying she was sure it was nothing, he probably just lost track of time, but it wasn't like him, he always called. She told me more than she needed to, the way frightened people do, because talking is better than the silence on the other end. She told me he'd had a hard year. His father had died in the spring, and Aaron had taken it hard, and he'd started hiking again, alone, to clear his head, because it was the one thing that made the noise in his chest quiet down. She told me he was breaking in a new pair of boots and had complained about a blister the last time out, and she'd bought him better socks. She told me it was her birthday that weekend and he'd said he'd be back in plenty of time, that he'd made a reservation somewhere nice. Little things. The things that make a person instead of a case number. We ran it standard. Found his car at the North Trailhead, locked. Nothing wrong with it. A travel mug in the cup holder and a folded map on the passenger seat, and, on the dash, a birthday card in an envelope with Denise's name on it in a man's careful hand. He'd left it in the car so it wouldn't get wet in his pack, I figured. He meant to be back for it. We pulled the trailhead register, the paper sign-in at the kiosk, and Aaron Vale had signed in at 9 the previous morning and had not signed out, which fit a man who'd gotten hurt or lost somewhere out on the loop he'd written down as his route. Nothing about it at first had anything to do with Cabin 6. The North Trailhead was miles away, a whole different part of the district. Aaron Vale had no reason to be near Cabin 6, and no way to get there without a half-day cross-country slog through closed terrain. We drew our grids around the North Loop and started bringing in teams. That afternoon, back in the camera room, I was pulling footage from every camera near the North Trailhead in case one had caught Aaron coming or going. And out of habit, out of the sick pull the thing had on me now, I opened the Camera 14 folder too, though it was nowhere near the search. There was a new batch, uploaded overnight, and in the third photo a man was sitting at the table in Cabin 6. He was wet. His jacket was soaked dark across the shoulders, his hair plastered flat, like he'd come in out of hard rain. He was sitting at the table in the gray infrared light, calm, his hands folded in front of him, looking at the open register. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man who'd found shelter and was glad of it, warming up, taking his rest. In the next frame, he was bent over the register, writing, a pen in his hand. I didn't know it was Aaron Vale until I pulled the photo Denise had given us. But it was him. Same face, same build. The wet man sitting calm at the table in the locked cabin, writing in a register that should have been in a box in the archive, was the missing hiker we had teams looking for miles away. I checked the timestamp on the first photo of him, and then I checked the time on the missing person report, the time Denise had called it in. The photo of Aaron Vale sitting wet and calm at the table in Cabin 6 was stamped 2 hours before his family reported him missing, before anyone knew anything was wrong, before he was even overdue. He was already inside a cabin he couldn't have reached, that couldn't be entered, writing his name in a book that wasn't supposed to be there. I zoomed in on the register page as far as it would go, and I could read it. Near the bottom, in fresh ink, a name, Aaron Vale, and beside it, in a different, older hand, 2 words, room held. That was the first time I saw those words. It wasn't the last. I took all of it to Dale Mercer. Dale was the senior ranger in the district, near the end of a long career, a quiet man with a gray mustache and a way of listening that made you feel like he'd already heard whatever you were about to say. I'd worked under him for years and never once seen him rattled by anything. I laid it out on the table in his office, in order. The 47 photos, the metadata, the sealed cabin, the 2 keys, the interior, the hand in the sleeve, and then Aaron Vale, wet and calm, time-stamped, before he was missing, with his name in the register and room held beside it. Dale listened to all of it without a word. When I finished, he did something I'd never seen him do. He got up and shut his office door. Then he sat back down and looked at his hands for a while, and finally he said, "I was hoping I'd retire before this came back." He told me the old stories then, slow, the way you tell something you've been carrying a long time. There were 3 that stuck, and I'll give them to you the way he gave them to me, because they're the closest thing to an explanation I ever got, and it still isn't much. The first was from the winter of 1978. Back then, the district still ran winter patrol. Rangers skiing the backcountry between shelter cabins, staying the night in them. Dale said there was a ranger that winter, an older man near retirement, who came up to cabin 6 at dusk in a snowstorm and heard people inside. Voices, a chair moving, and the cabin was locked, from the outside, the way the patrol always left them, and there was no way anyone could be in there. He unlocked it and went in, and it was empty and cold. No fire, no tracks in the snow around it but his own. He wrote it up as nerves and weather. And a few days later, back at the district office, somebody was going through the film from a camera that had been set at the cabin to watch for the vandals they were having trouble with that year, and there was a picture of that same older ranger sitting inside cabin 6 at the table, dated 3 days before he'd ever gone up there. He was in the picture before he arrived. Dale said the man looked at it a long time, and then he put in his retirement papers, effective immediately, and left, and as far as Dale knew, lived a long, ordinary life, somewhere warm, and never came back to the district once. The second was 1989. A maintenance man before Cortez's time was sent up to cabin 6 because there'd been reports again, lights, sounds, and the district wanted somebody to open it up and prove there was nothing in there and put the talk to rest. He was a practical man, didn't believe in any of it, and he made a point of saying so. He unlocked the cabin, went in, found it empty, wrote his report. Nothing inside, no sign of entry, recommend no further action, and turned it in. And when they filed it, somebody pulled the old cabin register to add a note, and there in the register, in the maintenance man's own handwriting, was his report. Word for word, the same sentences. Nothing inside, no sign of entry. Recommend no further action. Written in the register in his hand, on a page dated before he'd gone up. He'd written his conclusion into that book before he ever reached the cabin. Dale said that man didn't quit, exactly. He just started calling in sick, more and more, and then he transferred to a desk job in another region and never worked the field again, and never once talked about why. The third was 2001. A hiker, a young man, appeared in a cabin photo, trail cameras by then, sitting at the table in cabin 6, dated a full day before he entered the park. Nobody caught it at the time. It only turned up later, after he went missing on a trail miles from the cabin and never came back. When they finally went through everything, there was the photo, him at the table, a day early. And when they pulled the register, his name was in it, in his hand, with room held beside it, same as the others. He was never found. His case is still open. Officially, he walked off a trail, and it's a recovery that never happened. Dale kept that one in his own drawer, a copy of the photo, because it was the one that convinced him, once and for all, that it was real, and that it was patient, and that it did the same thing over and over across the years. There was a line, Dale said. One of the old patrol rangers wrote it in a register, way back, and I read it when I was young and stupid and curious like you are now. He wrote, "The cabin photographs you before it opens." Dale looked at me. I didn't understand it then. I think I do now. The picture comes first. It takes your picture inside, and then, sooner or later, the door opens and you're inside, and the picture was true all along. That's the order. Not you go in and then there's a picture of it. The picture, and then you go in. I asked him what I should do. He didn't dress it up. He said, "Do not go inside after your picture appears. That's the rule. It's the only rule that's ever mattered. If cabin 6 has taken your picture from the inside, you do not go to that cabin, and you do not put a key in that door, and you do not open it. Not to check, not to prove it wrong, not for any reason a reasonable man could give you." Because every reasonable man in these stories gave himself a good reason, and every one of them opened the door. I asked, "What happens if you do?" Dale was quiet a moment. Then he said, in the same flat, tired voice he used for everything, "Then the next photo's taken from your side of the door." I didn't understand that yet. I understood it later, standing in the rain, and by then it was almost too late. I went back to the office, more shaken than I'd admit, and I told myself I'd keep the rule. Photo 47 had shown me at the door. Fine. I would simply never go to that door. The photo would stay a picture of a thing that never happened, and that would be the end of it. Then a new batch uploaded overnight, and it was about me. I opened the Camera 14 folder the next morning with a feeling in my stomach like standing at the edge of a long drop. New photos. And they were darker than the others, deeper into the night, and different in one way that made every hair on my arms stand up. The lantern was lit. In every photo before, the kerosene lantern on the table had been dark and cold, just an object. In this batch it was burning. Warm light filled the cabin, threw shadows across the plank floor, gleamed on the wet boot prints, and the register on the table was open in that light, and someone had been writing in it. I zoomed in on the page. There was a new name at the bottom, freshly inked, in handwriting I knew as well as my own face, because it was my own. My name, in my handwriting, in the register of cabin 6, and beside it, in the older hand, the same two words, room held. The timestamp on those photos wasn't from that night. It was from the next night, tomorrow night. They'd uploaded overnight, but the time stamped on them was more than 20 hours in the future. And in the last photo of the batch, a man sat at the table in the lantern light, in a green ranger's coat, with a tear at the left cuff, looking straight into the camera, looking out through the boarded window, across 40 feet of dark, into the lens of camera 14, right at whoever would open this folder. It was me, sitting inside cabin 6, at the table, by the lit lantern, with my name freshly written in the register, looking right at me. I have never in my life been so afraid of a photograph. I called Mara and had her run every check again, and again it was all clean. Checksums perfect, files real, camera on the tree, GPS right, No login, but the automated pull. She ran it twice this time. And when she was done, she didn't say anything smart. She just looked at the picture of me at the table for a while, and then she said, very quietly, "Don't go up there. Whatever this is, please don't go up there." And I told her I wouldn't. I meant it when I said it. While she was working, the search for Aaron Vale pulled everything sideways, and Cabin 6 reached out past me and got its hand on other people. They'd laid search grids around the north loop where Vale went missing, and one of them, B7, covered the far southern edge of the search area, the part that came closest, still miles off, but closest, to the closed country around Old Service Road 12. I wasn't on B7. I was running camera intel from the office, but I was on the radio with the teams all day, and B7 is where it went wrong. The team lead on B7 was a ranger named Foley. Good man. Young but steady, careful with a map and compass, not somebody who spooks or gets lost. And over the course of that afternoon, his radio calls got stranger and stranger, and I have the transcript, because dispatch logs everything, and I've read it more times than is healthy. First he called in that his GPS was acting up. Their fixes kept drifting, he said. Always the same direction, south and west. They'd set a bearing to sweep their grid clean, walk it careful, and come out at the wrong edge, the southern edge, closer to the closed road than they had any business being. Then he called in that they'd lost flagging. They'd tied off a boundary with tape, worked their sweep, come back to re-find the tape, and it was gone. Not fallen, gone. No sign of it on the branch where they'd tied it, and Foley was a man who tied a good knot and knew it. Then there was a gap in the transcript, a few minutes, and when Foley came back, his voice had changed. He said the team was near an old cabin. He said they could hear somebody inside it. I got on the radio fast and told him the cabin was Cabin 6, that it was closed and locked and sealed, and that under no circumstances was anyone to unlock it or open it. He said they weren't going to, but that they could clearly hear a person in there. Knocking, he said. A steady knocking from inside the locked cabin. And a voice, muffled, a man's voice, like somebody calling for help behind a shut door. And then another searcher on his team, a woman named Reyes, cut in on the channel and said she could see light, lantern light, she said, warm and yellow, leaking out through the seams in the boarded-up window of a cabin that had no power and no one inside it. Foley said the man's voice was asking to be let out. He said his team wanted to open it, that if there was a person trapped in there, they had a duty, and he was right. They did. That's the whole job. And I had to sit in that office chair with the radio in my hand and order 4 rangers not to rescue a man who was calling for help. I told Foley the cabin had been photographed empty. The seal was intact. The keys were both accounted for, and that whatever they were hearing, they were not to open that door, and I made it an order. I'm still not sure I had the authority to make it an order. I made it one anyway. And Foley, God bless him, took it, and pulled his team back and re-ran the grid from the north. You can hear it in the transcript, the pause before he says copy, and then he says it, and then, off the formal channel, low, almost to himself, but the recorder caught it. He says, "That felt wrong, leaving somebody in there. It felt wrong, and it did, And he was right that it felt wrong, and I was right to make him leave. And both of those are true, and I've never been able to square them. 10 minutes after Foley pulled his team back, a new photo uploaded to the Camera 14 folder. I was watching the folder when it came in. It showed the search team, Foley, Reyes, and the other two, standing in the clearing in front of cabin 6, looking at the door, shot from inside the cabin, out through the boarded window, at 4 searchers, who by then were already a quarter-mile north and walking away. It caught them where they'd been, or where the cabin wanted them to have stayed. I put the photo timestamp next to the GPS log next to the radio transcript, all 3, on the desk in front of me. The GPS said the team was moving north, away, at the time of the photo. The transcript said the same. The photo said they were standing at the door. 3 official records, and one of them was lying, and the one that was lying was the one made by a camera on a tree that couldn't see the door at all. That evening I did what I should have done at the start. I went into the archive room and pulled the box for cabin 6, all the old registers, and I sat down on the cold floor between the filing cabinets and read. I read for hours. The dust from those pages is still, I swear, in the back of my throat. And I want to tell you what I found, because it's the closest I ever came to the shape of the thing, and it's still just a shape. The registers went back further than I expected, decades of them. The winter patrols signing in and out, the weather, the incidents. Most of it was ordinary. A ranger stayed the night, noted 3 feet of new snow, moved on. But scattered through the ordinary, across the years, were names that didn't fit. Names in handwriting that didn't match the ranger keeping that register. Names that showed up once, out of sequence, with the same 2 words beside them in that older, careful hand. Room held. I started a list, and then I started cross-checking the odd names against the office records, the old case files, the personnel files, and that's when the floor really went out from under me. Some of the names belonged to people who'd gone missing in the district over the years. Hikers, mostly. People I could find in the old case files, marked lost, never found, or found dead. Their names were in the cabin 6 register, with room held beside them, dated before they went missing, just like Aaron Vale. Some belonged to rangers, men who'd worked the district and then quit suddenly, or transferred out with no reason given, or, in 2 cases, died. One of the 2 who died was the old patrol ranger who'd written the cabin photographs you before it opens. His name was there, in his own hand, with room held beside it, and the date was from the winter he passed. And some of the names were dated in the future, dates that hadn't come yet. A few I didn't know, a few I did. And here's the part I still can't get past, the part that told me this was real and old and patient and far bigger than my 47 photos. The handwriting changed with every name. Each name appeared to be written in the actual hand of the person it named, as if every one of those people had, at some point, sat at that table and signed themselves in, whether they'd ever set foot in that cabin or not. Aaron Vale's name in Aaron Vale's hand. My name in the newest register in my hand, dated tomorrow night, room held beside it. And the room held was always the same slant, the same 2 words, across every decade, one hand that never changed while all the others came and went. Whoever wrote Room Held had been writing it for a very long time. I closed the box and I sat on that cold floor a long while, and I made a decision I'd been circling for days, and it was the wrong one, and I'm going to tell you about it anyway, because you need to know what it costs. I decided to go to cabin 6 at night. I know, Dale had given me the one rule, and I went. Not to open the door. I need that on the record. I did not go to open the door. I went because I could not sit in that office and let the timestamp arrive without being there to prove it a lie. The photo of me at the table was stamped for that night. I thought if I stood outside the sealed cabin at that hour, provably outside, and simply refused to be where the picture said I'd be, I could beat the thing. I thought being a careful witness against it would save me. I brought my notebook, and I wrote every step, in pen, time-stamped, where I was, what I did, because I trusted the record, and I thought an honest record in my own hand would be stronger than the cabin's. I know how funny that is now. The cabin is a record. I brought a notebook to fight a thing made out of notebooks. I drove out after dark, worked the gate padlock by headlamp, drove up the road, walked the last stretch through the dripping pines. It had started to rain, a cold, steady rain drumming on the trees, and by the time I reached the clearing, my coat was soaked dark across the shoulders. I wrote that down without thinking about it. It was only later, much later, that I understood it made me look exactly like the wet men in the photographs. Cabin 6 sat black in the clearing, rain hissing on the shake roof. I stopped well back from the door, at the tree line, and wrote down the time and my position. Outside, near the tree line, not at the door. I even said it out loud to the rain, like a fool, like testimony. I am outside. I am not going in. Then I heard it. From inside the cabin, from inside the sealed, locked, empty cabin, a chair scraped across the plank floor. The exact sound of a wooden chair pushed back from a table, and a moment later, the soft, dry sound of a page turning. A single heavy page turned over. I didn't move. I gripped the notebook, and I didn't move. There was light in the cabin now. I could see it, warm, leaking out through the seams in the boarded windows, the same warm glow the lantern threw in the photographs. A lantern burning in a cabin with no one in it. A chair had scraped. A page had turned. And I stood in the rain 40 feet away, watching light come out of a building that had been dark and empty and sealed a few hours before. A voice spoke from inside, calm, unhurried, close to the window, as if the speaker were sitting right on the other side of the boards, an arm's length from me. An older man's voice, and kind in the way that was worse than any snarl could have been, gentle the way you'd talk to someone tired who'd finally come home. It said, "You don't have to stand out there. You're already on the room side." I did not answer. Some deep part of me, the part that had listened to Dale, kept my mouth shut and would not give that thing my voice. I looked at my phone. I had the camera app open, the live network feed, and while I stood there in the rain, a new photo uploaded from camera 14, right then, live. I looked at it. It showed a man standing inside cabin 6, just behind the door, in a wet green coat, looking toward the boarded window. It showed me, inside the cabin. on the room side of a door I was standing outside of, in the rain, 40 feet away, watching the picture of my being inside arrive on my phone. That's when I understood what Dale meant. Then the next photos taken from your side of the door. There were two sides. The trail side where I stood, and the room side where the cabin kept insisting I already was. It was taking my picture from the room side now, not because I'd gone in, but because it had decided that's where I belonged, and it was only waiting for the world to catch up to its record. The picture comes first. My name was in the register. Room held. The photo of me at the table was stamped for tonight. All that was left, the one thing the cabin could not do for itself, the one thing it needed from me, was for me to open the door and make it true. Then the voice at the window said my name. My full name, soft, patient. And it said, "Come in out of the rain. Your seat's been ready a long time. Just open the door." And here's the part I'm least proud of and most grateful for, both at once. Because as I stood there, another voice joined the first. A different voice, from deeper inside the cabin, weaker, and it was crying. It said it was cold. It said it had been in the dark a long time and couldn't find the door, and please, please open it. Please let me out. And I knew that voice, because I'd spent 3 days listening to his wife describe him. It was Aaron Vale. The missing hiker was inside cabin 6, cold and in the dark, begging me to open the door and let him out. I stood in the rain, and I had to choose. Everything I am as a ranger, the whole reason for the job, is that when somebody's trapped and cold and calling for help, you go, you open the door, you get them out. That's the part that matters. That's the only part that matters. And a man was calling my name from a locked cabin, saying he was cold, and all I had to do was walk 40 feet and turn a key I didn't even have with me, and I could not do it. Because I knew, the way you know the worst things, all at once with no doubt left, that if I opened that door I would be making the photo true, and the seat that had been held so long was not for Aaron Vale, it was for me, room held. And if there was anyone at all in there to save, saving them meant crossing to the room side, and once I was on the room side there'd be a new photo from a new place, and the next name in the register would belong to whoever came looking for me. I did not open the door. I would do it again, and I hate that both of those things are true. I backed away, slow, into the trees, with the voices calling behind me. My name, and the crying, and the please, please. And I made myself write in my notebook with shaking wet hands, one last line. Did not open the door. Outside the whole time. Backing out. And I turned and walked out of that clearing while a man cried for help behind me, and I walked the 4 miles out with the rain running down my collar, and I drove home, and I did not stop shaking until the sun came up. Aaron Vale was found alive. 2 days later, a search team found him wandering, hypothermic and confused but alive, on a fire road 11 miles from cabin 6, in the opposite direction from anything that made sense, in country that had already been searched and cleared once. He didn't have a scratch on him beyond the cold and the blistered heels from those new boots. He'd been missing 5 days, and he thought it had been 1 night. I went to see him in the county hospital, because the case was mine and I needed his statement, but also because I had to know. Denise was in the hall, and she grabbed my hand when I came in and thanked me, thanked all of us for finding him, and I couldn't look at her while she did it. Aaron was sitting up in the bed, pale, quiet, still somewhere else behind his eyes. He told me he'd taken shelter from the rain in a cabin. A dry, warm cabin, he said, with a lantern lit. There'd been a ranger there, a kind old man in an old-style uniform, who told him he could rest, that he was welcome, that a place had been kept for him. Aaron said he'd felt safe, safer than he'd felt in a long time, since before his dad died, and he was a little ashamed to admit that, a stranger's cabin feeling more like home than home. He said the strange thing, the thing that finally made him leave, was that the old ranger kept telling him he couldn't stay, kept saying Aaron's name had been written down by mistake, that the seat wasn't really his. Aaron said the old man seemed almost apologetic about it, and then, near the end, almost relieved. He told Aaron someone else was coming, someone who belonged there, whose seat it really was, and that Aaron should go home now, back to his wife, while there was time, because the room was needed. Aaron said the last thing he remembered before the fire road was the old ranger looking toward the door, waiting, glad, like a man who'd been holding a table for the wrong guest a long, long time, and had finally gotten word the right one was on his way. I didn't tell Aaron Vale that I was the right guest. I never told him. He went home for Denise's birthday a week late, and I hope he read her the card that was still on his dashboard, and I hope he's still hiking somewhere flat and safe, and I hope he never once thinks about that cabin again, and I know that last part isn't true. Here's what I put together, or as together as it goes, and then I'll leave it, because I don't think it wants to be understood, and I don't think understanding it does any good. Cabin 6 isn't haunted the way people mean that word. It isn't a ghost rattling around a room. I think it's a record that got loose from the thing it was supposed to record. Somewhere back before Dale, before the oldest register even, there was a ranger whose whole life was that cabin and that book, who signed everyone in and out, who kept the count, who held the room for whoever was coming up the trail in the storm, so nobody would be caught out in the cold unaccounted for. And I think he was good at it. And I think he was proud of it, the way Cortez is proud of his key log, and I think he never stopped. To him, everyone is expected, everyone has a seat, and the trail camera didn't change what the cabin does. It just gave it a new way to show us. The camera doesn't photograph where it is. It photographs where the cabin has decided you belong. It takes a picture of the claim, not the place. And once it's photographed you inside, from the room side, the register writes your name in your own hand, and the world starts, slowly, patiently, to lean toward the clearing, the grids tilting, the flagging vanishing, the voices calling, until the day you finally walk up and open the door and make the photo you already saw come true. The picture comes first. Then, if you let it, you come second. And then the record was right all along. And the record is the only thing that survives. I did not let it. That's the one thing I did. I never opened the door. I don't know if that saved me or just moved the reservation. Aaron said someone else was coming to take his seat, and I refused to be that someone, and I don't know who took it instead, or if anyone did, or if the seat is simply still held, waiting, patient, the way it has waited across all those years and all those names. I don't know. I've made my peace with not knowing, mostly. It comes back on the cold nights. I transferred out of the district that winter. I asked for reassignment, and I didn't give the real reason, because there's no line on the form for the real reason. And I took a posting at a flat, open southern park, a long way from any pine forest or closed cabin or dead-end fire road, and I tried to leave it there. I keep my own log now, every single day, in pen. Where I was, what I did, who saw me. An honest record in my own hand, so that if any other record ever tries to say I was somewhere I wasn't, there's a truer one to stand against it. I've learned that a record is not as safe a thing as I used to think. But it's what I've got, and I keep it, every day, and I don't miss a day. Months after I left, a package came, forwarded from the old office. Inside was a single printout and a note from Mara. The note just said, "This uploaded last week. I checked it 4 times. It's real. I'm sorry." I didn't know if you'd want to see it, but I thought you'd rather know. Because here's the thing about camera 14. After all of it, we pulled that camera off the tree. It got logged into evidence. The whole unit, the housing and the card, sealed in a bag, on a shelf, in the locked evidence storage room at headquarters. It hadn't been on a tree in months. It hadn't been anywhere it could see anything but the inside of a cardboard box in a locked room. And it uploaded one more photo. The printout was that photo. It showed the inside of cabin 6, the plank floor, the boarded windows. The table, in the lantern light, cleared now. Nothing on it but a single green register, closed, sitting square in the middle. And I knew, without needing to open anything, whose name was written on the last page, in my own hand, with 2 words beside it, in that old careful hand that never changes. And in the corner of the photo, pulled back from the table and turned a little toward the door, was a chair, empty, waiting. So here's the part where I tell you what I learned, in case you ever need it, in case you're ever out there, and the world starts keeping a record of you that you didn't agree to. If you ever see a photograph of yourself inside a locked place you know you've never been, do not go there to prove it wrong. That's the instinct. That's the reasonable, rational, procedural instinct. And it's exactly the instinct the thing is counting on. It doesn't need you inside first. It's patient. It has all the time there is. It will hold your room for years. It only needs one thing from you, the one thing it can't do for itself. It needs you to open the door. So don't. Don't put a key in the lock. Don't go to check. Don't go because a grid keeps pulling you there, or because a light's on that shouldn't be, or because the door's talking to you in a kind, patient voice that knows your name. And especially, do not open it because a voice on the other side is cold and frightened and human and calling you for help. That's the one that gets good men. That's the one that got a hold of me in the rain and nearly won. The seat was never for them. The seat is for whoever opens the door. I still feel the pull, some nights, a long way from those pines. A sense, on the cold nights, of a room held open somewhere, a lantern lit, a chair pulled back and turned toward a door, and a patient, kind voice that has waited a very long time and does not mind waiting a while more. I keep my log. I stay where the land is flat and there are no cabins. I don't go looking. And if you ever find that last photo, the one where the table's been cleared and the register's closed, and you already know your name is on the final page, look at the corner of the frame before you do anything at all. And if the last photo shows an empty chair, do not sit down.